and welcome to the Ruth MacFit Podcast. I have a very special podcast today because, well, if you're watching this, you might actually realize that I am joined by a very special guest today. But if you're not, I will introduce her. It's Claire from FitPositive in Ireland. And now, Claire, if you're on social media, you'll have seen that we've had conversations there because I met Claire because she sent me a message on Instagram. I think one of your friends had messaged me, hadn't they, Claire?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
then
Vicky.
I think it was No Crap Cake that actually pulled you over. So Claire works as a coach in Ireland. She's a personal trainer, nutrition coach, health coach, helping people with similar things to I help people with, really, women in midlife. Is that right, Claire?
That's exactly right. Yes. Hello, Ruth. Thanks for having me on. So excited.
Yeah, it's very lovely. We've been chatting about doing this for a little while. And
Yes.
there's an area that both myself and Claire are passionate about, and that is the kind of positive aging. But I thought before we go on to that, it'd be really, really nice to hear a little bit. Well, I'll talk a bit about my story as well, but I'd like to hear a bit about how you've ended up where you are, because you didn't head into midlife in the most typical way, in the sense that you didn't decline, you leveled
Yes,
up.
100%. But I did have a low point before I leveled up. So, well, first of all, I'm 48 now, and I have two kids, a husband, busy life, busy job, just like everybody else, really, at this stage of life. And when I was 42, yes, as you mentioned, I'm a health coach and personal trainer now, but I wasn't always a health coach and personal trainer. And before that, I had a busy life working as a product manager in the IT sector. And so busy life, traveled a lot, and everything was fine in my 30s. I was into fitness, and I was doing exercise and running and mainly cardio. But then as I kind of went from 40 on, at 40, I was still okay. But at about 42, I really I think between 40 and 42, gradually declined into this low place where I didn't have any idea about perimenopause. Nobody ever talked to me about it. And all of us, it seemed like all of a sudden, but it was really a gradual thing where ended up, my mood reduced. Had low mood, increased anxiety. I remember a manager at work talked about this concept of low grade anxiety, and I was like, that is me. I have low grade anxiety all the time. I had a knot in my stomach, and I didn't even know why it was there most of the time. And then I was gaining weight, even though I was trying to be fit and healthy. I had this busy work life and the two small kids, a lot of travel with work, and I just could not get my head above water. So all of the things I was doing when I was younger just no longer worked. So I increased all those things, and they just seemed to make things worse for me. So I took up triathlon. I was doing a lot of exercise, all cardio, working myself into the ground in exercise, and then also at work. So everything was stressful. And I was gaining weight, doing more and more and more cardio. It just wasn't working. And I was feeling exhausted. And so at 42 was that low point for me, where I remember I had to go to bed every day for a nap. And I was lying in bed one day, the sun was shining. My parents were out hiking in Connemara, which is a mountainous area near where I live. Gorgeous, lovely weather. And I was lying in bed, couldn't function. I really just couldn't function. And mum sent me this photo of them at the top of a mountain. They were in their mid 60s at the time, maybe late 60s. And I was like, this is not right. I can't go on like this. It's not just getting older, because they're older than I am and they're fine, climbing mountains and hiking and doing all of the great things that I wanted to be doing, but I wasn't able. So I knew something had to change, and I could not figure out what to do. So I decided then at that point to reduce my work. So I went part-time at work, and I started to study nutrition. Then I studied health coaching, and eventually I layered on the personal training qualification on top of that. And as I learned over that whole few years, I suppose, I spent studying, and I ended up giving up my job completely to really just dedicate myself to studying this whole area. And as I learned, all of the things that was doing were actually wrong. I was actually vegan as well, which is not a bad thing at all. It's great to have, a healthy whole foods diet, but I had no protein and no healthy fats, very
Yeah.
few healthy fats in my diet, and all cardio and high stress life. So all of those things combined were really, as well as the hormonal fluctuations that came along with perimenopause, were this kind of, that's what resulted in my low point. And then once I understood it and studied it, I could turn it all around. And although I was going down all these really deep rabbit holes prior to studying it, just by, doing my own research online and, finding something on Instagram, trying that, it didn't work, trying something else. And I didn't give anything really long enough there was no chance for it to work, because I tried it for a week. I was like, that didn't work. I'll move on, try something else. Nothing worked, until I went back and studied the science. And once you realize, that you can actually study the science, you can actually go and find the research papers and figure out what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's been proven, then everything gets easier to understand. So then I really developed the Fit Positive method through experimentation on myself, as a result of all this study, and turned my own health around. Long story short, now I'm 48 and I feel like better, fitter, stronger, healthier than I've ever felt in my life, really, even before all of this, So yeah, that's
And
my story in a nutshell.
the thing is, this is what we want to hear about more, because like you said, your parents in their 60s, late 60s, are out walking and doing amazing things, but it's so easy to think that that isn't going to be the path. And I also love hearing your story because, I wasn't a PT and I wasn't health coaching or doing nutrition forever. I was a primary school teacher before this. And I know that when I first qualified as a PT, I had that bit of that imposter syndrome, thinking I didn't have that sporty background. But what I've realized now is that the struggles I had in the past, the reasons I was finding it hard at different points to lose weight or to recover or to focus on those areas, are what makes me the coach I am today. And that will be the same with you. It's actually because I have gone about it a funny way that I've ended up being a better coach because of it. And I mean, I burnt out a bit earlier. I was 32 when I got rheumatic fever, an autoimmune condition that made
Yeah.
me very ill. But, I think it takes often a low point where you have that fork in the road and you're like, if I carry on going down this route, then I'm going to be somewhere I really don't want to be. And you do just have this moment like something has to change. And it's a shame that we have to get to that point. But you don't, luckily, me and Claire both got to a low point so that you don't need to, hopefully.
Yes. Exactly.
hopefully that, the mistakes made along the way. And yeah, there's a science there, but it's also can be very simple. There's a phrase that I really like about asking yourself, am I committed to change or am I interested in change? And I think the reason that I like it is because when you are interested in changing, you do dabble. You try something for a week, you're like, it doesn't work. You try something else and you're constantly trying different things and thinking it's not working for you. But really, if you're committed, you don't have to do everything. If you're picking one thing, you commit to that one thing, and that will work if you stick with it. And it's really easy to go all over the place, isn't it?
100%. It's the simple things done consistently, which I was not doing. I wasn't consistent, but it's those simple things done consistently over time that actually make the difference. And that's so simple and not exciting, but it's just true, which is a relief, really, for a lot of people.
And I was like, you were doing endurance sports. I think you were doing triathlon. I was doing a lot of running. I still do run, but I was running in a very different way then. Now I tend to go out for a run because it makes me feel good. I like, it's less about watching what time I'm doing and feeling like I should be doing more. And I think in the past, I thought if I needed to lose weight or needed, because that's how that I should be running more and eating less. And that was just classic going to lead to burnout, wasn't it?
100%. Yeah.
And then if you get injured, what do you do then? It's not the nicest way of going around it.
And
Um,
what I was doing was I was cycling, 90-kilometer cycles, and I would come in to the house and overeat then for the rest of the day because I was absolutely ravenous. So I had this tendency to overdo the cardio and then overeat as a result. And it just didn't end well. So I just needed to simplify it. I didn't need to go. I had the all or nothing mindset, which so many people have. I was all in. I was not just going for a little cycle. I had to go and do a half Ironman. And then I was all in doing my half Ironman, which is a great sport. I loved it. And I had such a lovely community when I did it. But as soon as the race was over, I was doing nothing for another year.
I mean, it's great to have these challenges, to challenge yourself, mentally and physically and so on. But I think they call it the rungaries, that running hungry feeling. I mean, if we're talking about energy balance, in theory, if you're moving more, you're going to be using more energy. But the problem with overdoing cardio is that you end up over restricted and then you overeat. And you don't overeat on those foods that are going to be making you feel good either. You tend to just overeat on the high sugar, high fat,
Yes.
whatever you can get, fast fuel.
Yes.
Talking about consistency and journeys, for Mother's Day, I got the Recipe Tin Eats book. I've actually done an Insta post in the Sue. But when I looked through the book, at the beginning, it had Nagi's, I've forgotten her surname, her story. And she was chatting in the front about, I've got a very boring story. For me, I was just quietly doing the things I was doing, taking pictures. I never planned to go viral. I never chased trends. I just made consistently good recipes and just stuck with it, with only 2 people visiting my site at the beginning and now 335 million. So that's 2014 to now. But what I kind of took from that is, with everything, any goal, if you just show up consistently and doing what you've committed to doing without getting sidetracked by the trends that are going around, then it will happen. And yeah.
And the key,
Like,
I think, with doing that and ensuring you can be consistent is not to go all in and make it too hard and unsustainable, which I know you care a lot about. We both do. With making things sustainable is the key. And I think a lot of people don't.
and I was chatting to a lady on the phone the other day, and I mentioned to you about talking about this in the podcast. Seems like a good time. She said that she's not officially perimenopausal yet, but she's at the age where it's coming. And she said she finds herself feeling stressed because even though she is doing some strength training and focusing on all of those things that she feels she should be doing, she'll suddenly see another bit of advice that you should be doing this and you should be doing that. And she's finding it stressful because she's worried about the future because she can't do all of these things. And I thought we're doing a disservice to women, really, because it's got to be sustainable. You can't do everything that you see on the internet, or you would, well, it's unrealistic. So it is trying to pick the simple things that you can do now and do them consistently, and it will make a difference.
And there's a phrase that I love. I use it in my posts all the time, but it's not me who came up with it. It was Dr. Lane Norton. I don't know if you
Oh
know him.
yes, yeah.
In the US. He can be, he gets into a lot of arguments online, but he is very good with the science, and he always says, move the big rocks first. So if you are getting those simple things done consistently over time, then by all means try and layer on something else more complicated, but not until you have those basics nailed. And what people tend to do is they're trying to do the basics, then they see something else that draws their attention. They go, oh, try this, and then they try something else, and then the consistency is gone and it's all overwhelming and confusing. So that's, I think, what both of us do in our communities is like focus on moving the big rocks first, keeping things simple, get the foundational elements up and running. And it's not necessarily easy to do the simple things, even though they're simple. They still require effort to get them up and running consistently for a long period. That's hard, but once you do it, you do see huge impacts, and it's just those simple things done over time. But then when you get all this other stuff coming at you, it's very easy to get distracted from the simple things.
Oh, and my husband still sends me stuff on Instagram and says, what about this? And I'm thinking,
Oh,
gosh, if
yeah.
he's getting confused about that, then it must be confusing so many other people. I I also think we can be our own worst enemies in the sense that because we have tried so many other things in the past, we are convinced that things won't work for us. And I had a nice phrase. I can't remember the Buddhist word for it, but it's the beginner's mindset. If you're going into something, embracing the beginner's mindset is a really good approach. Going in open minded, assuming you're starting again as a beginner, pretend you know nothing about it, and then go from the beginning, go from the start, and don't be upset if you think that something hadn't worked before, because this time it's different because you're going
Yes.
to do it consistently.
And when you have that beginner's mindset, you're focused on learning as opposed to succeeding, which I think is really good. Just learn. And it's not about failing. You say this as well, but it's not about failing. It's about learning. So everything you do, whether it works or it doesn't work, you're learning. And that's a positive move in the right direction. What we always say is, it's just data. What you're capturing about yourself as you go through these programs, whatever your program is, you're just learning about your own body and how it reacts to the stimulus that you're putting on it, whether it's strength training or increasing your protein or whatever it is. You're just learning. So it's not like this must work. It should be, well, I tried this and this is how my body reacted. So what does that mean? Oh, I've learned something. Now I'll tweak it, and go from there, rather than so having that attitude of curiosity as opposed to, this is the last time I'm trying this. I've tried so many things. It needs to work. If it doesn't work in 3 weeks, I'm out.
Which we are also very impatient. So I can see
Mm,
why people get into that mindset. But even just committing to doing it for a few months, whatever it
mm,
is you're doing, you'll see a difference for sure. I get annoying with the phrase, there is no failure, only feedback. But is it Seth Godin that said, those who fail most win? You are going to fail at things. And I say fail in inverted because it isn't failing. It's just part of the process. There's going to be times where things don't work. But the key is to have a think about why. In fact, I had a client that messaged me recently and she was saying about how she'd had an emotional eating episode, but she's putting it all behind her. And I just thought, I just want to check this because she'd said that she was emotional eating because she had a busy day. I was like, could it be that you hadn't eaten enough as well? And she went, oh, well, it could have been because I didn't eat breakfast that day because I was rushing. And I was like, we're very quick to just go, I'll put it behind me. It's this, it's that. But sometimes we do just need to take a moment to question if there was anything else, because now we know if I don't eat breakfast in the morning and I have a busy day and I'm rushing around, I'm going to likely overeat in the evening, which is
yeah.
normal.
Yeah.
And it's asking yourself the question why it happened.
Yes. And don't always jump to the conclusion that it's willpower and failure on your part, or that you just have a sweet tooth and there's nothing you can do about it. Often it's biology. And when you can
Yeah,
tweak that biology, once you understand a little bit about how the midlife body works, you can then manipulate things to make it work in your favor. And yeah, that's what I really loved about the courses that I did and the study that I did, was that I understood my own body better. Because I don't know about the UK, but for me in Ireland, I did not learn anything. I learned about biology, but I didn't really learn about nutrition or how to fuel my body, how to nourish my body properly. And I think they're learning more about it nowadays. But in my day, back in the 90s, we did not learn anything about it. So I was putting food into my mouth, no idea what impact it was having on my health or well-being or, sugar cravings or any of those things.
I definitely didn't take in any information about that in secondary school. That it might be that they taught it to us, but it didn't stick in my head. But I know primary school teaching wise, they do the eat well plate. But no, I think there's very little, and I definitely didn't know things about how protein would keep you fuller for longer as well. I wouldn't have known that. I would have been looking only at the calories for sure and thinking,
Mhm.
if I'm clever, I can eat some chocolate and wine in the evening and save those calories to then, whatever. I definitely wouldn't have been thinking I'm unlikely to want the chocolate in the evening if I've
Yeah,
eaten enough during the day.
exactly. Yeah.
But
And just thinking about what you said earlier with the fact that you were a primary school teacher before and I was a product manager, I think I really do, and not necessarily PTs for our whole lives. I love that you have that background. So you were a coach basically as a primary school teacher as well, because you're educating and coaching kids to learn. And that's what so you can bring that into your life now. And same for me in the IT world, we did a lot of, and this is where I learned that there is no failure, there's only feedback.
Yeah.
So it was like all about, we had all these processes in the IT world where you're experimenting and you're gathering data on a software product, and you're trying to see if this works. And you have it's called lean agile software development. And you have a hypothesis that something is going to have a particular outcome. And so you test the hypothesis in a little sprint, it's called, and it might just be 2 weeks, it might be 4 weeks, it might be 2 months, and you test it, and there's no judgment at the end of it. You test it, see if it works for a while, gather the data along the way so that you can make an informed decision at the end as to whether or not it worked. And then at the end, you go, did it work? Yes. Okay, we'll keep going. No, what do we need to change? There was no judgment, and that's, I think, what we need to embrace across the board, really.
100%. I think we can be very good at doing it with other people as well. But everyone always thinks that they're the anomaly, that it's different for them. And I know with children are very good at bigging themselves up which
Yeah.
we lose the ability to do. But we used to do, I think it's 2 stars and a wish was something that they used to do. And it was like, what 2 things have gone really well? What thing could make it even better? And I sometimes think that actually, if we were going about our day and saying, yeah, that's been really good today, that's been really good today, and here's something that didn't work and why, and what can I do
Yeah.
next time, that actually that's going to help us loads. But we stop reflecting on what
Mhm.
we can do, and we follow the same repetitive cycle without even realizing it. We're just very much an autopilot, aren't we?
Banging our heads against the wall. What's that thing, that expression where you keep trying the same thing, expecting a
The
different outcome?
insanity.
It's
Yeah,
the definition of insanity. Yeah.
yeah.
That's sometimes what happens, because we're so stuck in the weeds and we're so in a firefighting mode, reactive, that we don't have time to zoom out and reflect. Or we just maybe don't have the prompt from somewhere. And I think that's where coaches can come in handy and give you these little prompts throughout the week where now it's time to reflect. We did that in the IT world at the end of every sprint. We called it a retrospective. And every day we had a daily stand up where you stand up literally in the office. It was a bit silly that we all had to stand up, but that was just the way they did it. And you stand up and you talk about what happened yesterday, what went well, what didn't go well. Do I need help with anything? So that I can keep moving forward. And, what changes do we need to make today based on what happened yesterday? Like, you could do that in your health as well, or in your general life.
It all overlaps. Everything. I see patterns. That's why when I was reading the recipe book and I saw Nagi's story, I think there's so many similarities between the successful things that you could apply to fat loss. I think it does take stopping and asking. And also, I think we have a fear of asking for help as well at this stage of life. We feel like we've got to be able to manage everything. And I don't know about you, but often the most successful clients are those that are kind of getting involved in the group chat, asking for help,
Yeah.
chatting more and more. The ones that are struggling quietly and not wanting to bother anyone. And no one's going to know to be able to give them that guidance unless they actually are brave and say, it's me, I'm struggling with this, because it's fine
Yeah.
to struggle. It's normal. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a thing as a coach.
And I think that might come from our childhood. Like when we were in school, if you asked a question and it was a stupid question, the teacher would give you a funny look and, how can you not know this? We covered this yesterday, this kind of thing. That's not the case anymore, I don't think, nowadays in school, hopefully not. But I unlearned all that when I worked in IT, and I was taught that there is no such thing as a stupid question. And the more questions you ask, the more you will end up learning, and you should feel empowered to ask the question. It doesn't matter how stupid you think it is. And I love when people reach out to me for help in my community, and I'm always so grateful that they do, rather than struggle in silence. There's just no point to that, and
Yeah.
it just makes people feel worse.
I in school, I was definitely the same, hand down, didn't want to say anything, scared
Mhm.
I'd look stupid. I think it was when I was training as a teacher that I started to undo that a little bit more. And it's still a bugbear of mine. My husband would tell you, if people laugh when someone asks a question. And
Ooh,
I
yeah.
really can't stand it. Even if my kids, if I say to them that I don't know something that they're talking about and I hear them do a little laugh, they'll see my face just go, no, no, no. You have to, if I knew, I wouldn't ask you. So don't
Yeah.
make me feel stupid for not knowing. You can just explain it to me. Because I think that we get so put off ever asking for help because of how much we've been laughed at or
And we're
made
afraid of
to.
being judged. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I don't mind people asking for help at all. Changing the way we age, obviously you're living proof that you can start that perimenopause where in theory people think it's all down here from now, that's very much that messaging that's going around. And for you, you are the strongest you've been. I know that I'm the strongest in my 40s. I'm a little bit younger, um, but
A
it's
lot.
coming. But I feel great in my 40s, better than I did in my 30s for sure. But what made you feel confident enough to get stronger? I guess that's what I'm asking, because you did it because you saw your parents walking. But
Mm.
if you weren't strong already, I mean, what did you start with? Was it just nutrition, or was it building the strength as well? What
Yeah.
changed?
Well, I started with just studying nutrition. That was it.
Yeah.
And I was really 100% focused on nutrition. And I was still doing my cardio. But as I learned more about nutrition, I knew that, they talked about protein and how it was important in terms of building muscle. And that just led me on to understanding the importance of strength training and building muscle. And then I started doing strength training myself. And then I just very quickly decided what I realized, I suppose the revelation that I had, I was studying nutrition just. And that because that was the grayest area for me and the thing that I found most complicated, I didn't understand anything about nutrition. So that's where I doubled down and tried to study and understand all of that. And then I realized that it's not just about the food. It has to be a comprehensive approach. So the revelation that I had when I was going through all of this learning was when we take a comprehensive approach with those simple habits, that everything our bodies just start to work for us, but it needs to be comprehensive. So if you're just focusing on nutrition, which a lot of people do because we have all these fad diets, and they think, oh, I'll just do this diet, I'll do keto, and then that'll transform me or solve all my problems, or I'll lose the weight. And what I understood as I went through the learning was that all of our body systems need to work together. So it's not just about consuming the right fuel, it's about how we use the fuel to build the muscle, which then helps us store the glucose if we have more muscle. Everything works together. And then the brain as well, obviously, is fueled by the same good nutrients and exercise. And so in the end, I became a personal trainer so that I could bring that comprehensive approach, and that's how I approached it for myself as well, in that I just decided, and because I used to go to lots of different workout classes over the years, in my 20s, and I had loads of time and I could spend an hour and a half at the gym. And then I realized, okay, well, why was I not so consistent with my workouts in the past? And it was often because they were too long. And then other times it was because I joined a gym on the other side of town, which I was never going to be able to go to consistently. Or, my husband traveled as well. So if he traveled, then I couldn't go to the gym because there was nobody to look after the kids. And I realized, okay, I need to define something or design something that works for me at home on my own. And I'm not going to be interrupted. The consistency won't be disturbed by travel, somebody else's travel, any of that. So I just started doing these 30-minute at home dumbbell workouts. And that's how I achieved the results. Literally just 30 minutes at home with dumbbells, strength training it was just strength training. So in those 30 minutes, it was all strength, no cardio. And then I just did, at that time, I just combined that with walking. And I think I was still doing a little bit of running at the time as well, but mainly just walking. Eventually I stopped running. Now I'm starting to run again. I'm layering on some sprint training, and maybe I'll do more running this summer. I'm not sure yet. But my method that worked for me and got me to where I am today was literally strength training and walking. That was it.
Yeah. Which is lovely and simple. And actually, you don't need to be doing the cardio within your workouts, do you? It's
No.
if you are walking separately,
Mm.
then that's fine. And actually, if you were looking at the NHS in the guidelines, they say 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio per week, which can be a brisk walk as a
Mhm.
minimum, and then 2 strength and balance training exercises as well.
Mm.
And obviously, it can be more, but the point is that actually a low percentage of people are actually even doing the minimum.
Yeah.
So doing 30-minute workouts, I think often people are like, well, I need to go to the gym, but you don't. If you're doing nothing anyway, and
Yeah.
you start doing home workouts that are body weight because you've never done any strength training before, that's still going to be working your muscles pretty hard. So I think
Mm.
we often will go, well, I can't do that, so we don't do anything. But actually, you do what you can, and it's going to be better than nothing. I did actually look
100%.
at this stats again earlier because I was thinking, I hope I haven't got it wrong. And it's 27% of women and between 19 and 64 are doing the recommended amount of both the 150 minutes cardio and the strength training. So actually, it's a really low percentage of people
Mm.
doing both of those things. And the way that we see aging at the moment is this decline, right? And that probably is right considering those stats. So we know that there's a chart somewhere. I'll try and share it in the show notes or something. But if we look at aging, those that are physically active doing those strength and balance exercises through adult life are far less likely in older life to end up in the disability threshold. So I'm
Mhm.
there going, well, there's a correlation there. And we also know that a lot of us aren't doing it. So maybe when we look at old age, we're looking at it because most people aren't staying active. So I'm
Yes.
all for changing that for a start.
Yeah, 100%. So from the fat loss side, I combined the nutrition and everything with it. And same for the general health, that comprehensive approach to, nutrition. And obviously we'll get into the mindset side of it as well, which is huge, as well as the strength training and walking. But keeping all of those little parts of the puzzle or pieces of the puzzle super simple at the start is obviously the way to go. And then over time, and it can be years, it doesn't have to be all done in a 6-week program or a 12-week program. You can layer on other habits and make it more sophisticated over time. Like I'm just adding sprint interval training to my routine now after how many years? I wasn't
Is
doing it
that
before.
Is that because of Stacey Sims? Of course,
Yes.
because I was going to say, because you said at the beginning before we started, Claire had
Yeah.
said that she'd started a course with Dr. Stacey Sims. So when you said the sprint training, I was like, that sounds because high intensity exercise, along with strength training, has been shown to preserve and improve bone density,
Yes.
even without HRT. So, the impact's actually not necessarily a bad thing for you.
Mm.
It can be really beneficial. So I know that she's big on doing these short, fast intervals, isn't she?
Yes, yeah. Also, Dr. Van der Wright is
Ah,
recommended it as well. And another longevity expert who I've followed for a long time is Dr. Peter Attia. He's in the
ah,
US. You know him, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah.
And he also recommended it. And so in the back of my head, I knew there was this little piece of the puzzle that I hadn't yet layered on. And I was okay with that because I was like, I'm not ready to do the sprints yet. It kind of requires a mental readiness. So I just wasn't ready to layer that on. And I still got all of the other results. But I knew from a longevity perspective and the heart health and the lung health that it would be good. And you can incorporate it into your workouts. You definitely can, if you want to, you don't have to go out and do sprints on a road or on a track or on a treadmill. You can just increase your heart rate a couple of times a week is all that they recommend, just to keep the heart healthy. It's not really hugely, I mean, it's not essential for fat loss, but it is beneficial. So,
Yeah.
I
Energy.
didn't have it in my routine.
No. And again, it can be beneficial. And I think the reason that so many coaches are scared of saying about the cardio and the fat loss is because of the fact that so many of us in the past have got obsessed with cardio in order to lose weight, and it's not what worked because of the fact that it drives your hunger out. And if you're trying to really restrict your calories and then overdo the cardio, then you can end up in quite a deficiency overall, which can lead to overeating, or it can lead to something called RED-S, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. So we try not to look at earning food through cardio because you don't need to. But there is the energy balance. So if you are moving more, you are going to be using more energy.
Yes. And you're more inclined to move more if you're walking, because you can do it all day long.
Yeah.
So that's why I recommended walking, because what I found was, and I did this myself, I used to go for 3 5K runs a week, and then I sat at my desk for the rest of the week. So my steps were actually really low. And it wasn't until I started counting my steps with a smartwatch that I realized, oh my gosh, my steps are really bad. And I thought I was so good doing my run 3 times a week. And that's exactly the trap that you can fall into by doing your cardio, because it feels hard. You feel like, I've done a hard run there for 5K, so I deserve to sit down for the rest of the day. I've done my exercise. When actually it's that constant movement throughout the day that actually really does use up the calories and use up the energy that you've consumed. Because it's not really, people get hung up on the word calories, but it's really just energy that you're consuming, and you need to use it. You just need to use it. That's why you have it.
Fat is stored energy. If you see it
Yes.
as stored energy, that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the walking, I think, was a huge eye opener for me, really, that I wasn't doing. And it's so simple. It's one of those examples of the simple things done consistently over time that has a huge, huge impact. And I just wasn't doing it.
And I also think that with movement, because you can lose weight with focusing only on nutrition, obviously, but there's a couple of reasons other than long-term health why movement is so good. And it makes us feel good. And when you're feeling good, you're more inclined to do the other things as well, which is kind of goes on to the mindset chat. But it's partly why exercise, nutrition go so well together, not just because it's long-term health, it's going to make you stronger for longer. It's because you feel good. And when you feel good, you feel calmer. You find it easier to make those choices that align with your goals. So don't underestimate the power of getting outside for a walk, because it does boost your mood, doesn't it?
And just thinking about that point that you made earlier about the longevity, there was another study that Peter Attia mentioned that was done in the US, and I mentioned this a lot to my members, and it is this hip fracture statistic. So they studied, a big group cohort of people who were over 65 and broke a hip. And the reason they broke a hip sometimes was because they had osteoporosis already. So they hadn't done anything. If you don't proactively do something to increase your bone density, it will obviously decline. And so they had reduced bone density, and they hadn't maybe worked on their balance and stability in those workouts that are now recommended. Because in those days, they weren't recommended. Like, as my mum says, I never knew. Nobody told us that we needed to do those kinds of stability, balance, strength training. We were just told to do, move, keep moving. And that's valid, but you also need to work on stability and balance and strength and bone density. And so the statistic is that if, these people who were studied, they broke a hip and they ended up in hospital. So then they ended up in a period of inactivity for 6 weeks because they had a hip replacement, which further decreased their muscle mass and their bone density. So they tracked them for a year, and a year later, 30, I think it was 35% of them had died because of the inactivity leading to more inactivity, leading to reduced muscle mass and bone density, which then led to another fall. So they go back out to the world and immediately they fall again. And then often you'll hear, my granny, around the time my granny was going through this process, she had osteoporosis and multiple falls, which resulted in a nursing home. And then eventually she passed away. And they always look back to a particular fall, the first fall, and they say that was the beginning of the end, really, for her, that fall that she had. And that's why, and the reason they have the first fall is often because of they lose their balance And then because they haven't got the stability in the muscle mass, they lose their balance, they break the bone, and the cycle goes on.
Yeah, and it is that muscle mass that can help you with your balance. But like you said, then when you've fallen, that lack of bone density means that you hurt yourself quite badly. That
Mhm.
Mel Robbins podcast that you were listening to as well,
Yeah.
she was saying in there that she gets them to do fast feet, which I
Yes.
actually wasn't something that had even registered. I do a lot of single leg work, and when you're doing any even lunges and things like that, you're working balance there as well, step ups, whatever. But when she said fast feet, I thought that's so true, because if you're about to fall over, if you can put your foot out quickly,
Yeah.
it's going to
Yeah.
stop you. And it hadn't even occurred to me.
I was
that
just talking about this to my husband because we were on a walk the other day and he tripped over something. And I just said, you see how you moved your feet really quick there to catch your balance before you fell. If that was somebody in their 80s, they might not have had that speed, the foot speed, and that's why they fall, and then so you need not just because you can trip over something. Even it might not be that your balance is a problem, but you just literally fall over something. And if you can move your feet fast enough to catch yourself before you fall, you'll prevent that bone
maybe
breaking episode.
maybe we should teach all old people before they get old, learn to fall as well, because I know
Yes.
that my husband did a lot of martial arts kind of growing up, and if he falls over, he just tucks and rolls, it's fine. Whereas
Yeah.
I land heavy.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
not so good. I'm trying to learn, but I'm not a skateboarder. But I was having a play on a skateboard, and it went out from under my feet, and I just landed, boom, massive bruise, and it was almost at standstill. And I'm like, if I knew how to fall properly, then that would
Mm,
probably help as well. But it is worrying that we end up in nursing homes because of these things that can be preventable so
mm.
early on. There's the saying, you don't get old and then immobile, you get immobile and then old. And we
Yes.
do suddenly stop moving so much. When we've stopped working, maybe we're going home and we're not moving as much because we're not getting up and getting out the door.
Mm.
And not everyone's going to be like that in retirement, but there are a lot of people that start getting aches and pains. So stop doing as much exercise, so as much movement, which is completely understandable.
Mhm.
But you do what you can. You might not be able to go to the same workout class anymore, but there's normally something that can start building you up bit by bit. And that's when you were
Yeah.
saying about the sprint training. I was like, not everyone is going to be able to do the sprint training yet,
Mm.
but you might be able to walk downhill. That's going to be higher impact if you can do that. You might be able to go on a trampette to get a little bit of high impact there,
Mhm.
which is a bit softer.
Mm.
But the point is, you start where you are. You have that beginner
Mm.
mindset. You start from the beginning. So,
Yes, and it can be something as simple as just jumping on the spot. It doesn't have to be running. Anything that increases your heart rate, like you say, walking up a hill, even. We've got a hill outside our house here. You could just literally walk up or run up that hill 5 times over as fast as you can, and that's it. And if you're not into running, you can just walk briskly at the start, but then really you do want your heart rate to increase for the aerobic fitness. So you probably want to do some jumping on the spot, and that'll help your bone density. But I think what people get confused about is that, oh, so I need to be jumping on the spot now. I need to be doing sprint training now. I need to be doing this other thing. I think what you need to do is just go to a coach who will incorporate those things into the workout for you. So you don't need to remember all of these things. That's what coaches are for. That's what personal trainers are for. So I think sometimes people like Dr. Vonda Wright, who's amazing, and Stacey Sims, they go on to podcasts and everyone says, okay, I need to tick this box, this box, this box. I think if you go to a good coach, they'll do all that for you. All you need to do then is show up and press play or turn up to the gym or whatever it is, and keep it simple that way, so don't worry too much about the detail because somebody else should be qualified to look after that for you.
and also that coach should understand where you're starting, because again, this
Yes.
goes back to the background that you have and so on. I remember looking at the different programs that coaches were offering. I thought essentially it could look like everyone is doing the same thing. They're working out people's calorie requirements. Some people might go quite low, but ultimately the calorie requirements are getting them to move a bit more. But coaching isn't that. That's the
No.
easy bit of coaching. The easy bit is setting the targets and giving you the exercises to do. It's the coaching comes into the background they've got and how they understand when it's hard. Because really, if we can plan for the hard days, plan for chaos, and understand what we can manage then it becomes easier. So I think if you are somebody that has a busy life, having a coach that can understand that too is
Mm.
quite helpful. I think it's just knowing that coaching is somebody that can understand and help you find strategies, not just tell you what to do.
Yes, because nowadays everybody can find out what to do by just doing a Google search. And I heard something on the internet the other day. Some expert was saying that's not what we need now. The skill of knowledge is not what we need. It's the application of the knowledge within a particular context, given a particular person's circumstances. That's where the talent is, to be able to apply the knowledge. Whereas years ago, it was the knowledge, because we didn't have the internet, and it was nobody knew what to do. Now we all know what to do, or we can Google it if we don't. It's trying to find a way to make it work for you, make it sustainable for you, and modify it according to where you're at, and then modify it as you go so that you keep making progress.
And
All
then
those things.
reassurance for the times where you're questioning yourself, because if you've been in a habit loop for a long time and you have a bad day, there's every chance that your mindset is going to go back to wanting to do whatever it is that you've been working hard to not be doing anymore, be that coping with reaching for food, whatever it is. And I think it is then the reassurance that actually that happened and we can put something in place for next time. And it's not a reason to give up and think things aren't working. Sometimes
Like
reassurance
even your
is
example there of the emotional eating episode, just to have
yes.
somebody go, do you think that maybe it might be this, where the person wouldn't have thought of that themselves and could have, continue to be really hard on themselves and and that can send you down a really negative spiral if you keep doing that emotional eating, and then you keep being really hard on yourself and beating yourself up about it, when it was probably just that you didn't have enough food earlier on in the day, and somebody outside of the situation can point that out in your context, whereas you might be just too deep in the weeds to do it.
I definitely would have done that years ago as well. Back in the day when I would have
Mm.
been running a lot and trying to not eat so much. And then you think, I defy all the logic because I am not eating very many calories and I still weigh X amount. And then suddenly you actually start eating meals with enough nutrients in. It feels like you're eating more, but calorie wise, you're not.
Yes.
And then you are losing weight and feeling better for it.
And the relief that people
Oh,
feel when that happens is like, that's the most rewarding part, I think, of the job is, when somebody realizes that finally they realize that actually there isn't something wrong with them. It's just, we just needed to tweak this small thing here or there. And now it's all flowing nicely. And it's that comprehensive approach again, I think, is that, like, you take with the mindset side of it, as well as the food and the exercise and the sleep, like they all do need to work together. Unfortunately, we have to do that at this stage of our lives. Like when we were 20, maybe we could get away with short night's sleep and winging it in certain areas, and just maybe cut out the sweets for a week and you're fine. But now we really do need that comprehensive approach. And then, but if you do take it simply over a long period and not worry too much about a time frame, then you do feel amazing. Like the way that I have felt now compared the way I feel now compared to when I was 42 6 years ago, there's just no comparison. And I feel like I'm just going to feel stronger and fitter and healthier in my 50s, which is just a lovely place to be.
I'm excited. I'm not wishing my life away, but I'm excited for what's to come. I'm not scared of getting older. I feel great
Mm.
about it. And I was very much putting out the message about feeling stronger for longer. And then I realized that so many people are worried about the future and like, I've got to do this because I need to think about my future. But actually, enjoying it now is key. So the things that have you feeling great now will look after your future. So you kind of don't need to worry about the outcome. You
No.
just focus on now and choose things that have you feeling better, which are going to be down to what you're eating is going to make a difference, how much you're moving is going to make a difference, and then focusing on giving yourself time to understand yourself, feeling calm. Those things will have you enjoying life more anyway. And if you're feeling overwhelmed and there's something that you find as a real sticking point, I heard recently a great question to ask yourself, which is, how can I make this more enjoyable? Just choose one thing and think, how can I make it more fun? And it might be that you don't like your workouts, and it's like, okay, well, would I enjoy it more with a friend? Would I enjoy it more at class? Would I enjoy it more if I was dancing in the kitchen to get myself moving to begin with? And you do that, and the rest will happen. The future will improve if you're improving what you're doing now and feeling good for it.
Yes, I love that. And a second question I was thinking, I think I talked about this at some point ages ago, was how can I let this be easy? Because we can go to the most complicated, like say for making dinners, for example, a lot of people, and I did this myself, we go to the most complicated meal out there and we're like, this is how I have to cook now. No, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And you can make it easier. And for everybody, your definition of easy is going to be different to somebody else's. So you have to ask yourself that question. How can I let this be easy for me and more enjoyable? And those are the things that then make it sustainable.
They're the best habits, to get into the habit of doing things that make life easier, not harder. And I've been filming, making some recipes on the internet, and I always mess them up. And I don't try them out before I do them because I think that's fine. And I thought people will think I can't actually cook from a recipe, but it's because when I'm cooking at home, I very rarely use a recipe. I will just cook things that are easy for me. And I was actually doing an example of this on my Instagram stories, going, this is why, because I couldn't decide what to make. And I just cooked up some onions and some chicken. I added frozen veg, a bit of stock, a bit of cream cheese to have with pasta. And I was like, I just put in whatever is easy and it tastes delicious. But I think we feel like we've got to eat healthy recipes, but actually we can eat with our family and in a fairly normal way and still achieve our goals. It doesn't need to be anything special.
And I think all you need to learn is like very basic, the basic principles of, is there protein here? Is there a healthy fat somewhere? Is there some fiber? And then, go from there. Make it as easy as it needs to be for it to be sustainable for you.
Yes. And the fiber is one that is so easy to not be getting enough. And it's not helped, not the fiber chat. The fiber chat's fine. There was someone contacted me, I think it was Tim Spector that had said it, about how protein isn't good for us. And I was like, oh yeah. But I think in hindsight, when I looked at what he'd said, what he was actually trying to say, but obviously he was trying to boost the five movement because of Zoe. But I think what he was trying to say is if you focus only on protein and you're only getting it from complete protein sources, then you're not going to be getting enough other nutrients, including the micronutrients like fiber. And sometimes we can approach a diet like that. If we're like, I need to get protein, we start only looking at the protein yogurts, the protein shakes, the meats and so on, and we start eating less veg and less whole food. But you should be able to get enough protein, enough fiber, enough veg as part of a balanced diet. So it does get confusing when you get doctors that are saying these kind of overtly clickbait headlines about you shouldn't be eating as much protein. It's like, no, what he meant was you should be also looking at the other nutrients.
Yes. And he's talking to the general public. But I think, women in particular and anyone who's aging, we absorb the protein, metabolize it less than we did when we were younger. So we need even more of it than the average, what's recommended by the government or the NHS.
We've been dealt a poor card when it comes to what happens when we age compared to men. Men get that lovely kind of natural decline, gentle decline. We get a bit of a decline and then it just shoots down in like muscle mass and bone density at perimenopause. We get these changes of hormones that feel quite unmanageable. And I think, that's not very nice, is it? That we go through all of that.
Just after we get over the whole childbirth piece.
Yeah, because that
young kids.
And actually, pelvic floor health is something that again, menopause, if you've struggled with that a bit after having children, during perimenopause, when your muscle mass is decreasing, you can suddenly be really impacted by issues with your pelvic floor that you perhaps were managing before and are now worse. So that's not great for your confidence at this time of life. Again, it goes back to muscle mass and keeping your muscles strong.
Yeah.
But it's something we get embarrassed to talk about. And again, there's something that we can do to help it, but that can put people off doing those higher impact exercises as well.
Yes, totally. But again, if you do have a coach who is focused on women in midlife, they'll incorporate, what you need into your workouts. And then if you need extra help, I think it's so important to be able to reach out for that. Because there's nothing, we've been through childbirth. What could be more embarrassing? The doctors have seen everything already. So who cares if we go to somebody for pelvic health, pelvic floor health, help? It's so important to be able to look after your pelvic floor to prevent incontinence later on. And you just have to, and I know we have this temporal disconnect. Dr. von der Reich talked about that because she works with people who are older ladies who've maybe broken a hip and they're incontinent and they're in a terrible situation and they're like, how did I get here? They have no clue how this happened to them. And they're talking to their daughters. She mentioned they were talking to their daughters at the side of the bed saying to them, don't let this happen to you. And it was the incontinence that was so embarrassing for them, as well as the fact that they were in so much pain because of their broken bones. And like there's so much that we can do about that now, but we do often have a temporal disconnect, so we can't connect to that time. That's kind of a survival mechanism, I think. You don't want to be thinking about the end of your life as you're going through it, but you do have to do certain things to prevent those outcomes.
You definitely do. And I know that when we were talking just now, I said, focus on the process. We can worry less if we're doing the things that make us feel stronger now. Incontinence is another reason people end up in nursing homes when they're older. And I think if you need some motivation to stay out of the nursing home, doing that strength training, focusing on your nutrition is going to be important. But if you're doing your strength training and you're keeping moving, then you're going to be future-proofing yourself a lot as well. I mean, ideally, you're not just going to be eating chocolate. That'd feel pretty rubbish if you just ate chocolate and only did your strength training. So I'm sure that you'll be fueling yourself well as well.
Yeah. And isn't it a combination, like you say, learning to feel good now and listening to your biofeedback at the end of every day or every week? Because sometimes these things, you improve your health, but you don't actually notice it, because it's not a number on the scale. But if you do just pay attention to your biofeedback and how alive you feel or how energized you feel or how your mood has maybe improved or you feel more in control of everything that's going on in your life because you're less overwhelmed. Like these things we don't take note of as much as we do the number on the scale. And I think it's so important, like you say, to do that reflection at least once a week where you're saying, well, how am I feeling now across all of these areas, not just the number on the scale.
And they change quicker than the number on the scale often. When you start incorporating these things into your life that will help you longer term, it's those non-scale related wins that you notice so quickly. You might notice that your skin is starting to clear up, that you're feeling less bloated, that your energy has increased, that your mood is better. All of those things can really improve. And you need to take time to notice it. And I know I'm aware of the time of the podcast, but I know that you and I have spoken privately about ADHD, and people with ADHD often don't give themselves time to even register or think. And that is something that in midlife, women are getting diagnosed with more because there's so many other things going on, and people with ADHD don't seem to cope with changes in hormones. Not, it's other people struggle with them as well, but people with ADHD can struggle more. And I think it can be really hard to stop and give yourself a moment to kind of go, actually, I did my best today. Pretty proud of what I've done. If you're not stopping and thinking.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I have a member her daughter reached out to me on Instagram the other day. Nothing to do with ADHD, but just the fact that the daughter noticed the mum and the effect my program, or the healthy habits she has embraced. She sent me a message to say, I would just like to buy my mum some weights for Mother's Day. And just to let you know that I've never seen her so happy and confident and happy in her own skin before. And it's all down to the healthy habits that she's embraced. So thank you. I was like, oh, I wonder, does the woman herself take time to notice that? Or is it just the people around her? But even the fact that the daughter will give her these weights for Mother's Day and say all these things is just so lovely, because now she set that example for her daughter as well. The daughter is seeing the difference in her mom between, before and now. And that's just invaluable, teaching for the daughter.
And maybe we need to make a more of an effort that if we notice those changes in other people, that we say to them,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
maybe the mum wasn't noticing, but she will think about it and reflect on it when prompted by her daughter and saying, you've seemed so much happier recently.
Yeah.
So maybe we do need to take a moment to say to other people, not you were really grumpy before, but that you're seeming in a really good place. And I've had it, people will say in check-ins that their husbands have noticed and so on. And obviously we're doing it for ourselves. The changes you're making, again, you do it to make yourself proud rather than other people. But it is always nice when others notice that you seem lighter, that you seem, and I don't mean physically lighter, I mean lighter in mood and energy and so on. It can be a great
100%.
time of life.
It's lovely. Yeah. I was just going to come back to the ADHD thing, actually.
Yeah.
Because
Classic ADHD to just sway away from it and then come back.
Just try. Yeah. But I was diagnosed with ADHD in December, just recently. So last December at 47. And I had kind of suspected, that's why I went for the assessment, when I learned more about the condition and all of the traits. And I was, one of the things that the psychologist who I was working with said was that the routine that you have in your life now, with this structured routine of workouts, walks, and a reminder in your phone to do all these things every day, is actually ideal for you. For me, because everyone is different. Every person who has ADHD has their own experience of it. But for me and my experience of it, she was like, you get overwhelmed easily, you need structure, you need a routine. That's quite common, I think, with people with ADHD. And so having the routine takes the decision out of it. And the decision fatigue was huge for me. I was like, oh, I can't decide what to do. I don't know. Should I do this? Should I do that? But once you have this all sorted in a program, whatever your program is, as long as you have it and you have a schedule and a routine, and ideally, if you're moving in the morning first thing, that's even better, because you can settle better then at your desk if you're working at a desk. Because I have this restlessness, that I need to get out of my system before I can sit down at a desk. So I did a workout this morning before this interview. And she was like, that's the routine that you need. You need a routine, that uses up your energy and helps you to then focus on whatever it is you need to do that day. So I thought that was really interesting, because I already had the routine up and running at that stage. But if I didn't, and if I was newly diagnosed with ADHD without a routine like that, that's exactly, she said, what you would need to be doing.
Yeah.
That was funny.
I also have ADHD, and when I was younger as a child, I didn't have that knowledge and I didn't have that routine. I didn't have a diagnosis as a child, but I was an absolute nightmare in that I couldn't focus on anything. And I think back to that time and think, if I'd just known that I learn in a different way, I have to move. So if I want to take in information, if I put on headphones and go for a walk, I can absorb it really well. If you sat me in front of a computer to watch it, I'm gone. I'm distracted. I can't do it. I find it really hard. And I think it's just understanding that you can achieve the same results. You might just need a different path to get there. And that's what I've got two autistic boys, and that's what I try and get across to them. It's not being a victim of your diagnosis. It's being empowered by it, understanding that it doesn't mean you can't achieve the same thing. It just means that you might need a different strategy. And for ADHD and autism, neurodiversity in general, having a routine that's regular, that removes the decisions that you're making during the day, is game changing. And also not doing those things like I used to do, which was skip breakfast,
Mm.
because trying to keep that busy mind on the go, also getting to the point where you're really, really hungry, it's a recipe for disaster with an overactive mind.
Hmm.
So,
It's like, it reminds me of, when I was, the way there's a concept of time for when you have ADHD, it's like it's now or it's never. For
yes.
me, that's me anyway. So if it's now, so my husband would say, "What'll we have for dinner?" But it was 11 a.m. I'd be going, "I don't know. I'm not hungry right now." So I can't actually think about that. And then at 5 o'clock, I'll be like, "What are we going to do for dinner?" And he's like, "Well, we didn't decide anything." So, so it's this like there's a temporal disconnect there as well. But just what you said really reminded me of, you can be empowered by your diagnosis, or if it's perimenopause, same thing.
Yes.
You can be empowered by it. You just need to know how to you operate a little bit differently and know what systems are impacted by whatever it is, whether it's perimenopause or ADHD or autism, and and manage that. So with perimenopause, we have all of our systems are impacted by our hormones, estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. So we need to understand that and then manage those systems better through diet and lifestyle. And if you need HRT as well. But for me, what I'm using is diet and lifestyle at the moment. And I am understanding that those systems are a little bit compromised because of the hormonal fluctuations. So I need to not further compromise them by overloading myself with sugar or stress or not doing any
Not
exercise.
sleeping.
Not sleeping, yeah, and help those things that are challenged, those areas of those systems that are challenged by the hormonal fluctuations, by doing the things that we know work.
And I think that that is key. Often people will feel like they can't do those things or it's out of their control because
Mm.
of the perimenopause. But there's often little changes we can make, which are going to give us the best chance of getting a good night's sleep. You might be getting woken up because of hot flushes, and that is vasomotor symptoms are annoying. But there might be things that you could do during the day that might help with that, with
Mm.
regards to what you're eating, what you're drinking, and so on. But because we've lived this lifestyle for many years, it's quite hard to then blame the lifestyle because we've got away with it. But right now, it's not helping. It's changes we could have done with making years ago. Everything that you want to do during perimenopause are things that we would have benefited from much earlier anyway, but they just become more important because of those hormonal changes. You're so right
Mm.
though, because I think with everything, we can either be the diagnosis or we can be informed by that diagnosis. And it's approaching it and asking yourself, what can I do? This is happening to me. I can't, change that stage of life. Every woman that gets to this sort of age is going to go through it. It happens.
Yeah.
But we can look at the things that are in our control. Obviously some women do get hit pretty hard with symptoms. There we go. I could chat to you for so long about lots of different things because this stage of life, there's so many different areas, like a whole podcast of mindset and what
Mm.
you can do there. But here's a question for you. If you've got a woman that's coming to you, she's perimenopausal, she's got loads of symptoms happening at the moment, she's finding it hard to get moving, to eat well because she's tired. So she's in that kind of sugar energy cycle.
Mhm.
Where would you get her to start if you said to her, yeah, just do this one habit? What would be your go-to habit? I'm just interested. There's no judgment. Obviously, there'd be more that ideally people would do, but if you said,
Mhm.
try this one thing, what would it be?
If it had to be one thing, I would say walking,
Yeah,
because it
moving.
helps with so many aspects of our health. Yeah, and it can be done for most of us, unless we have a hip injury or a broken bone. Most of us are in a position to go for a walk today, you know, and it can be just a 10-minute walk. It doesn't need to be a big 10,000 steps on day one. It can be, but ideally outside if possible, especially at this time of the year. We do have options like walking paths for indoor walking if you need them. But I think the one thing I would recommend for somebody to do today to get started is to just start moving by going for a walk, and they'll feel like they're making progress. And what I often say is, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the neurotransmitter. But the concept is that if you go for a 10-minute walk, you get the motivation to then keep going and do more. Dopamine is released in
Yeah,
the brain.
dopamine. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And that,
And yeah, so if you just start, it doesn't need to be a big deal at the start. It can be 10 minutes, because while you're out there for the 10-minute walk, you'll feel, you have to say to yourself, I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing that she told me to do. I'm doing the thing that is right for my health. So well done, me. And then that will release the dopamine in the brain that motivates you to do maybe 20 minutes tomorrow. And you can start there and just, in, like you say, make it enjoyable. Take a friend with you, call over to a friend down the road, 10 minutes away, take a podcast with you, enjoy it, and take that time for yourself. Nobody, I mean, maybe they will notice that you're gone, but usually they don't notice you're gone if it's just 10 minutes. They won't miss you. People feel that, oh, I have so much to do, but like a 10-minute walk should be doable for everyone, ideally in nature, because the mindset side of it, the stress relief, you're starting to move, you're physically in action. So you feel like you're making progress instead of feeling stuck. It's a great way to get unstuck. And then you just go from there, layering on maybe a little bit more water, adding a little bit more sleep, trying to get to bed, because the clocks have just changed. So it's hard for people to go to bed early now. And it's trying to inch back towards the earlier bedtime, maybe just 10, 15 minutes earlier each night. And going from there, and then layer on the more complex things with the nutrition and the workouts.
I'm glad you said that. Often people will come and they will be trying to get 3 workouts a week, 3 short workouts a week, but they're not moving. Like you said before, they're not moving the rest of the day. And when they skip a workout or they miss a workout, they feel really bad about it. And I actually had a lady recently that I was like, I'd almost be tempted to say, if you like doing your workouts, go with the non-negotiable of 2, but use the other time to walk, to get out and move, because actually motivationally, like you say, that's going to have you feeling great. You're going to feel less stiff and achy because you're not sitting down so much. But keeping it, as Claire said, to that short amount of time as your minimum makes it easy to go out. If you start upping it and going, oh, I've got to go for half an hour, there's no point. As soon as you don't have time, you won't go. So say, even if I can't manage a longer walk, I'm still going to go out and do 10 minutes and then be proud. Focus on how good it makes you feel, because you can get into the mindset of, oh, another thing I have to do. But no one's making you. No one is making you do it at all. You're choosing to do it. And if you're choosing to do something, make it something that you enjoy. And that can just be literally a reframe in your mind. Because I'm doing this because I want to feel good.
Yes.
Doing this to improve my health.
And maybe you could do the 10-minute walk directly after a meal to even further the benefits, and maybe and then eventually maybe it's 10 minutes after each meal, which is a half an hour, before you know it, in half an hour.
When Claire's talking about changing the benefits after a meal, there is a link between our muscles are the biggest site of blood glucose disposal. So if you get an energy slump in the afternoon, if you struggle with dips in blood sugar and so on, it's a good idea to just get up and moving after your meal anyway. So if you're not walking at any time, starting by timing it with meals is a really good idea. Yeah.
Stacking it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it is.
Anyway.
Yeah. The habit stacking, it works as well. It's great. Love
We're
that,
killing
Claire.
so many birds with the one stone.
I know. Exactly. I love it. I love that you went for walking. I would agree that would be one. And then the habits like maybe an evening routine where you just think ahead to tomorrow, give yourself time to work out what's worked in the day, be a bit introspective, learn a bit from whatever has happened, so that you start to understand and be kind to yourself rather than beating yourself up for the things that were never going to happen anyway.
Yes. And that planning ahead, you talk about that a lot. I love that. Just that it's not prepping necessarily. It's just thinking for 2 minutes about how you can make the next day run more smoothly, like you say. And I was just talking to my husband about that yesterday, because we made a lunch. It was a lovely salmon bowl, and I put it on the app later on. I was like, gosh, that was so easy. And he's like, it's just literally a case of thinking ahead. And for him, he made it and he thought ahead, early morning. He was like, what are we going to do for lunch? Let's do something nice. And that was it. He figured out what to do and we did it.
Good
But it was
guy.
just a case of planning instead of in the moment going, oh, I have nothing to eat for my lunch. What am I going to eat? And you grab something unhealthy. It's just that little bit of planning ahead. And it's not actually that much effort.
No, and actually that's been something that has been game changing when we talked about the routine, ADHD and so on, is not being scared of having similar breakfasts and lunches. You still get a bit of gut health variety because even having different varieties of fruit or different varieties of so on is going to change gut health. But I have been having very similar breakfasts. So I at the moment I am going through a bit of an overnight oat stage. It varies, but I'll have them and I'll make them up because that's just one thing I don't need to think about. And I'm having like a noodle soup jar thing that I make up in advance and then just put hot water on it because it means that I'm having protein and veg at every meal, but I'm not having to go to that fridge, open the door and realize there's nothing there and I haven't got time to cook anything, which is winging it. It's reaction rather than choice at that point.
And I think with ADHD, for me anyway, I can't make a decision on the spot like that about what to eat. I'm paralyzed looking at the fridge going, I don't know. What am I going to do?
I wouldn't be able to. There's no way. I'm thinking of our fridge right now. And if it wasn't there, a pot that is clearly Ruth's lunch, then I would look at everything else and feel like, well, I'd be tempted probably to skip my lunch, which would be awful. And I'd be like, oh, I'll just grab something when I'm popping into town. And then I get too hungry, and this evening I would be then snacking on whatever is around. Because
Exactly.
it isn't willpower. It's not a lack of motivation when I'm picking at things. It's because I haven't thought about what's coming out. But Claire, I have really, really enjoyed this conversation with you. I would love to have you back on another time. Not to put Claire on the spot at all, but I have heard on the grapevine that there might be a Claire podcast coming in the future.
Would love to have you on as a guest.
I would
Absolutely.
absolutely love that. But I think it's just really nice. And again, same with you. If you're on this journey, talking to other people that are on similar journeys, that are promoting healthy aging, feeling good now, it's so lovely to talk to people that have that similar way of feeling about midlife. It's not kind of all doom and gloom. It's actually positive and feeling like we have control. We can empower other people. So, even if you're not a coach, you can still spread the message that actually this is a good stage of life. So many adventures to come.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
And your podcast is going to be one of those adventures.
Hopefully.
Yeah. No pressure. Well, thank you. I will press stop and say thank you to everyone for being here. You can find Claire if you aren't following her already, which I'm sure you are, but you can find her on Instagram. It's FitPositive.ie.
That's right.
And then you can also, and you can find me at Ruth MacFit on Instagram as well. So if you've got any questions, then let me know or let Claire know. But otherwise, here's to feeling great in midlife.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you. Bye.